Hello friends, happy to welcome all of you to this new episode of my MIT lecture series. In this video, let me try to explain the scientific approach of MIT towards the controversial topics involved in vaccines as well as vaccinations. All of us know many homeopaths, especially those seniors who claim themselves to be classical homeopaths, are part of anti-vaccine campaigns around the world, and they even propagate the totally unscientific and anti-social theories that COVID-19 is not a serious issue at all, and COVID is only a global scam created by profit-motivated drug mafia to promote their vaccine business. Whatever be the concerns regarding long-term bad effects of vaccines, we cannot deny the truth that millions of lives were so far saved by vaccinations in past years, and many dreadful diseases contained or even abolished by it. Infectious diseases like poliomyelitis, smallpox, influenza, plague, diphtheria, measles, mumps, and many others were almost eradicated by vaccination. Beyond any doubt, vaccination plays a big role in protecting humanity from diverse kinds of infectious diseases. Vaccines are generally substances containing protein molecules that are alien to the genetic blueprint of the individual, extracted from the viruses or bacteria, and then processed and artificially introduced in the body for generating antibodies that could protect the individual from specific infectious diseases. RNA vaccines are RNA fragments extracted from infectious organisms and introduced into the body to generate antibodies indirectly. Once entering the living body, these RNA fragments can synthesize the specific protein similar to those of particular infectious organisms, utilizing the enzyme machinery contained in the host cells. Protein so synthesized, being alien to the genetic substance of the individual, defense mechanism of the body will obviously initiate production of antibodies against those alien proteins, exactly similar to what happens during infections. Whether protein or RNA, regarding the nature of their contents, vaccines are used to induce the production of antibodies against specific infectious organisms. Vaccines induce the production of antibodies in a similar way as infectious agents, and these antibodies remain in the body for long periods, in many instances for the whole lifespan of the individual, protecting the body from specific infections and infectious organisms. This is the aim of vaccinations. According to MIT view, antibodies are nothing but native immunoglobulin proteins belonging to the specific superfamily of immunoglobulins, deformed by getting subjected to a natural process of molecular imprinting by interacting with antigens that act as templates. An antibody, also known as an immunoglobulin, is a large Y-shaped protein used by the immune system to identify and neutralize foreign proteins such as pathogenic bacteria and viruses. Structurally, antibodies are glycoproteins belonging to immunoglobulin superfamily. The terms antibody and immunoglobulin are often used interchangeably, though the term antibody is something reserved for the secreted soluble form, that is, excluding the beta cell receptors. The antibody recognizes unique molecule of alien protein called an antigen, bind to them and deactivate or neutralize them. Each immunoglobulin molecule contains a functional group called paratope, which acts like a keyhole of a lock for the specific functional groups of allergens called epitopes, which act as keys. Allergens precisely bind to immunoglobulins by this key lock mechanism. conformations of paratopes of unspecified immunoglobulins are actually adaptable to the shapes of epitopes they are interacting with. Using this binding mechanism, an immunoglobulin can tag a microbe or an infected cell for attack by other parts of the immune system, or can neutralize it directly by blocking a part of the virus that is essential for its invasion. Even after allergens or alien proteins are destroyed or neutralized by the immune system, the proteins constituting the paratopes of specific immunoglobulins will remain in the modified form, carrying the memory of the particular epitopes as if it is converted into a molecular imprint. It is these molecular imprinted proteins carrying the memory of allergens or alien proteins that we actually call antibodies. Obviously, vaccination is a process of generating molecular imprinted immunoglobulins or antibodies by using allergens as templates. By this process of molecular imprinting, three-dimensional spatial conformations of functional binding groups or epitopes of antigens are imprinted into the functional groups or paratopes of immunoglobulin proteins in the body through a peculiar kind of host-guest interactions between them. These immunoglobulins with molecular imprinted paratopes remain in the body and can later act as binding pockets for the epitopes of specific antigens or pathogenic molecules which they enter later. This is the molecular mechanism involved in antibodies-mediated immunity, generated through infections or vaccinations. These molecular imprinted native immunoglobulin proteins or antibodies remain in the body for long periods, sometimes for the whole lifespan of the individual. These antibodies can bind to off-target biological molecules having functional groups similar to the epitopes of the respective antigens. This will lead to unexpected molecular inhibitions in associated biochemical pathways and create chronic pathological conditions. Even though we understand and welcome antibodies as friendly defense molecules only, we should be aware that these antibodies can play a pathogenic or disease-producing role also, since they can bind to off-target biological targets resulting in chronic disease dispositions. Actually, what Hahnemann called miasms were these chronic residual effects of infectious diseases due to the historical limitations of scientific knowledge. He could not naturally explain the biomolecular basis of this phenomenon and hence could not understand the role of antibodies in miasms. According to MIT, miasms are defined as chronic disease dispositions caused by long-term residual effects of off-target biomolecular inhibitions produced by antibodies generated in the body against endogenous or exogenous alien proteins such as infections, vaccinations, allergens, prions, mutated or misfolded proteins, etc. Obviously, vaccination similar to infectious diseases is bound to produce chronic miasms known as vaccinosis, producing various chronic diseases and dispositions including those belonging to the class of diseases so far inaccurately considered as autoimmune diseases by the medical community. My recommendation regarding vaccinations are based on the above observations. It will depend upon the situations rather practical than theoretical. I will prefer to choose lesser evil than bigger evil, later evils than immediate evils, opting for the evils that give us time to rectify than the evils that give us no chance to rectify. There is no point in talking about long-term adverse effects of vaccines and refusing to get vaccinated when I am bitten by mad dog. Here I am opting for long-term evils to avoid imminent threat to life. From the deliberations so far, it is obvious that vaccination can cause residual effects of or miasms in our body which may result in diverse types of chronic disease dispositions, including those we call autoimmune diseases. At the same time, knowing these evil effects of vaccinations very well, we will have to accept vaccinations in situations where life is in serious and immediate danger, especially in pandemic situations such as COVID-19. Now the question arises, how can we manage, prevent or antidote the miasms or chronic disease dispositions caused by off-target actions of antibodies produced by infections or vaccinations? Modern medicine so far has no viable solution for this issue of miasms. They have classified these diseases into a category called autoimmune diseases. Classical homeopathy also could not answer properly, as they also failed to understand miasms scientifically in terms of off-target actions of antibodies. It was MIT which for the first time in history scientifically explained miasms in relations with the off-target actions of antibodies, and only MIT can provide answers to the question how to deal with these evil effects of antibodies. Real question is how to protect our biological molecules from off-target actions of antibodies. According to MIT, using molecular imprints of antibodies is the only solution to the issue of miasms or harmful chronic effects of antibodies. In this context, we have to study the potentials of nosodes more deeply and scientifically. Nosodes currently used in homeopathy that are prepared from viruses and bacteria contain molecular imprints of pathogenic molecules and act inside the organism in a similar way as antibodies do. They can act as prophylactics by binding to the invading pathogenic molecules and also as curative agents, preventing them from attacking biological molecules. But such conventional nosodes prepared from infectious agents contain mostly molecular imprints of pathogenic molecules and hence could not be expected to be capable of antidoting the harmful effects of antibodies or miasms. In order to fight against chronic miasms or chronic disease dispositions caused by antibodies produced by vaccinations or infectious diseases, we need to develop a whole new range of novel class of nosodes using antibodies of various infectious agents. Antibodies against various infectious agents have to be produced and extracted and subjected to a process of potentization or molecular imprinting. Molecular imprints produced by that process could be used to treat the off-target chronic miasms produced by vaccinations. I hereby request CCRH to take up the project of preparing molecular imprints of COVID-19 antibodies as soon as possible so that it could be made available to the community to fight the long-term adverse miasmatic effects of COVID infections as well as COVID vaccinations. MIT recommends everybody to get vaccinated against COVID-19 without any hesitation and then use molecular imprints of COVID antibodies for a relatively long period to avoid the harmful long-term effects of vaccination. Molecular imprints of antibodies can prevent the antibodies from producing harmful off-target inhibitions of biological molecules, whereas they cannot interfere in the normal biomolecular processes being part of immune mechanism. Friends, hope I have explained the MIT approach to the issue of vaccinations and how the harmful effects of vaccinations could be managed using post-Avogadro diluted nosodes prepared from specific antibodies. Thanks for listening. We'll come back with another video on another topic related with MIT homeopathy very shortly. Goodbye.